So my name is Elizabeth. I studied modern languages, which I did on the German, Italian and European studies pathway, and I graduated in 2019. I currently work as a cultural property specialist for the Art Loss Register. So yeah, I graduated in the summer of 2019, and about a month later, I moved out to Vienna for about 5 months in total, where I worked for a company called Lomography, who work analog cameras, and I worked initially as a copywriting intern for them, and then that kind of morphed into probably being their copywriter for all their English language kind of marketing texts, PRs and stuff like that. I then moved back to the UK in December 2019, January 2020, and I started an internship at Sotheby's Auction House in their restitution team, where I was it was 3 months in total, but it ended up being about 2.5 months for pandemic reasons. But that was primarily working at, it was researching all the paintings that came into the auction house and making sure that none of them had potential ties to kind of families persecuted during the Holocaust or any ties to Nazi looted art from the Second World War era. And then I was unemployed, as a lot of people were when the pandemic kicked in. So I sort of kicked about at my parents' house for a few months in lovely Herefordshire and went on lots of nice walks and had nothing to do. And then I got a bit bored of that and decided I was going to do a master's. So I applied for the Courtauld Institute, where I started in October 2020. And initially, when I was applying for different courses, I was looking for something kind of focused around the Impressionists or anything that could have been labelled as degenerate art, for example. And I didn't get into any of those options, but I got approached by another tutor who was running a course on architectures of empire and the legacies of colonial spaces and colonial legacies. And she said to me, you're clearly very interested in World War II restitution. Have you thought about colonial restitution? And at that point, I thought, no, I haven't at all, but that makes so much sense. And kind of all the news surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement in the summer really took off. And there was suddenly, I think the literature had always been there, but it was much easier to access the literature surrounding kind of post-colonialism and looking at pieces like the Benin bronzes. And so when I started that, it just made complete sense to kind of branch out in both areas of restitution. And then I graduated from there in summer 2021, and a few months after that I got offered an internship here at the Art Loss Register, and I was very, very fortunate that someone happened to leave just as I started my internship. So they offered me, it's kind of a triple role. I also work as the office manager in HR, but kind of my primary role, and the one that I kind of had to convince them to let me do in my own interests, was as a cultural property specialist. So looking at pieces that are coming through antiquities dealers, through auction houses, that are kind of classical antiquities or ethnographic material, Asian art, and making sure that they weren't previously looted in any form or lost or stolen before coming up for sale. So restitution, kind of in layman's terms, is the art of giving something back. So you'll see a lot of things in the news at the moment about, for example, the Parthenon marbles, Benin bronzes, pieces that were collected during the colonial era in British museums and other Western museums. The countries that were colonised would very much like back. And then in the World War II kind of area of research, it's looking at pieces that were stolen by the Nazis whilst they were in power in Germany, and looking to see if anything needs to go back to the heirs of the families that were persecuted by them. And then looted art is, in a nutshell, art that was kind of stolen typically in war zones or areas of any sort of conflict where culture gets caught up in the middle. So, for example, Ukraine at the moment, or Afghanistan, Yemen, Iraq, Iran, Syria, all of these places where there have been conflicts going on. So the first thing I do every morning is I go through the news and I look to see if I look on Google for stolen art and looted art. And then there's a few individual art news websites that I'll go through, and I'll look to see if there are any new articles about, for example, anything that's being offered at an auction house that someone has something to say about, or if anything has been restituted, if anything's been stolen and that's been in the news. And if there are any articles about thefts, then I will forward those on to our registrations team to see if we've got them on our register already. And if not, can we look to register them on behalf of these people? I will then look to see if there's any office management HR stuff that needs to be prioritised, for example, people's sick days, people's holidays, if there's any sort of general admin that needs doing around that. And then I will log on and look at my cultural property tasks. And this will be where a dealer or someone from an auction house has submitted a search for a certificate, a search will run against our database that basically they want us to look into the names and the provenance and the history of the piece itself, and to let them know if it's on our database or if there's any cause for concern about the history of the piece. Aspects. Everyone that works here says that they have kind of the best department and the most interesting things to work on. For example, we have a team that works on watch thefts. We have a World War II Nazi looted art team, restitution team. We have a recoveries team, and then we have my team, which is the antiquities cultural property team. And I love that whenever there's something that comes up, because we deal with pretty much everywhere that isn't Europe between a certain couple of dates. So, you know, we're looking at maybe Native American Canadian pieces one day, we're looking at Maori pieces another day, pieces from Yemen the next week, depending on the trends of the art market and what people are buying. And so you'll kind of become an expert on one country and its cultural property laws for about a week. And for example, at the beginning of last year, I spent hours in the British Library looking at old colonial cultural property laws to see if a few pieces needed an export license before they came to Europe. And then I didn't get any pieces from Yemen for a few months, and I'd completely forgotten everything that I'd kind of taught myself in that time. So yeah, that was definitely a lot to get to grips with, but we all sort of work together whenever we have a new culture or something new to work with, and we'll sort of puzzle things out together if there's something we're really unsure on when it comes to making a decision. When you sort of develop research skills, you become very good at reading very quickly and just sort of scanning through looking for individual words, and that is a godsend because sometimes you have kind of the biggest documents to work your way through. And you just need one piece of information, for example, where something came from or the date that something took place. And, you know, you need to be able to find that information quickly. So that is absolutely an amazing skill that I learned. I think while I was doing my dissertation, having to scan through just a huge amount of material to find what I needed. It's not a race and it's not a competition with the other people that have graduated in your cohort. You are all on different pathways, you all have different interests, and it's going to take you very different amounts of time to get to that point that you want to be at. And it's very hard with things like LinkedIn and social media where you can see people putting these amazing updates up. But if it's not relevant to what you want to do, and even if it is, you know, in the same sphere, don't worry, because you know, if you put the work in and you work hard and you make the right connections, then it's all going to fall into place at the time that's right for you. And especially for getting into arts and culture, I can say as a person from a state school comprehensive background that with the arts, a lot of the time, even nowadays, is about who you know rather than what specifically you know. It's about, you know, people's connections. Someone's uncle that their father went to school with who happens to work at an auction house has given them an internship. So the way around that, if you're from a similar background to me, is to try and make those connections, get on things like LinkedIn. And if there's someone that's in a role that you think I'd quite like to do that, send them a message, because I know so many people, especially in my office, if we received kind of a direct message from a young person looking to get into the same area, we'd be more than happy to chat to them and give them a few words of advice, give them a hand with applying for internships or something like that. It's about kind of just going for it and asking the right questions with the right people. I'd just say, yeah, just go for it with whatever you want to do, because if something goes wrong and you know that you gave your 100%, you gave it your all, then if it doesn't work out, then you know that it wasn't down to you. You know that you couldn't have done anything else to change those circumstances. So just give everything your absolute all, and you'll end up where you're supposed to be.